We are inching closer to the college football season. Most importantly, let's be specific, the FAU football season. And anytime you get past Independence Day, 4th of July, you're basically on the doorstep. It occurred to me in the week or so that everybody was kind of laying low with Independence Day. And I don't know about you, but one, kept all my digits intact. That's a win. Two, went to Legoland, where it was about 175 degrees on Independence Day. But it also occurred to me, damn it, if there isn't anything more American than the numbers, and especially numbers with decimal points. And you know where numbers and decimal points live? In predictive computer models for the college football season. So what we're going to do to celebrate America, albeit after the 4th of July, we are going to look at predictive computer models of the 2024 FAU football season. And one of those in particular, it comes to the forefront. I don't know if you've heard these four letters before. ESPN. Pretty notable company. I'm not going to hold it against you if you haven't heard of them, but ESPN, they do some significant sports things. This ESPN, and their FPI came out. This is their predictive model. Okay, this is how they formulaically come up with, at the beginning of a season, where they believe a team will land in the pantheon of FBS football. They will use several different calculations to come up with a record, or at least a ballpark of wins and losses, and it's probabilities. It's basically probabilities, and that's what they're working off of, and then it gets tweaked as the year goes on. The Football Power Index. It's an acronym, FPI. Football Power Index, the ESPN FPI. So over Independence Day, I was able to put my eyes on something that really caught my attention, and this was the top 25 group of 5 teams, according to ESPN's FPI, going into 2024. This is Southern Charm Sports on Twitter. If you want to follow them, I couldn't care less. At Southern Charm SP. At Southern Charm SP. Here are your top 25. I'm going to stop at a certain point here. Number 1 is Boise State. They, going into the season, they have the highest FPI chance, according to ESPN, of presumably being in the college football playoff, grabbing a group of 5 spot. Then it's James Madison at number 2, UTSA out of the American at number 3, Memphis at 4, App State 5, Tulane at 6, Fresno State, Troy, Liberty 7, 8, 9, 10th to San Diego State, San Jose State is 11th, Texas State comes in at 12, and would you look at that? Number 13, top 25, according to the ESPN FPI going into 2024, is Florida Atlantic, FAU. And I found this interesting simply because you have a college football program that won 4 games a year ago and fell apart in the final month of the season, yet here FAU is, and they are, according to a major publication and a well-calibrated math model, a predictive model, sitting in the middle, right smack dab in the middle of the top 25 of the group of 5. And I'd say that already, perception-wise, is a win for FAU. But let me define the ESPN FPI before we really dig into this, okay? The FPI's predictive rating system, this according to ESPN, designed to measure team strength and project performance going forward. The ultimate goal of FPI is not to rank teams, rather to correctly predict games and season outcomes, okay? What goes into the FPI? It's composed of predictive offense, defense, special teams. It also factors in number of returning starters. It factors in production from a year ago. It factors in continuity of coaching staff. And all of these are then put into numbers, and it churns out, spits out a sequence of teams and where they sit in a particular order. And this year it's 1 through 133 in FBS college football. There's the addition of Kennesaw State this year. So I know you're thinking to yourself, well, FAU, they really overturned a lot of the roster, and that's true. And some of this stuff, to me, it's outside of my pay grade and my brain comprehension as to how FAU gets credited for some things and maybe dismissed in other things when it comes to the ESPN FPI. But all these numbers are put together, and all these different parameters are aggregated and summed up, and Florida Atlantic comes in at a very respectable number 85 in the country, a number 85 in the country ranking in the FPI. That's not bad. That's not bad, and especially when you look at FAU coming in at number 4 in this ESPN FPI. So let's dig into this, and there's going to be a lot of numbers here. I'm going to try and make this as clear as possible. Here's my overlying point, okay? I think there's a lot to feel good about with FAU, the way that things are at least on the trajectory for in 2024. Oh, Ken, you're the play-by-play voice. You're extremely Yes, all of those things are accurate, okay? But I spend my time looking at ways to be positive about this 2024 season. Positive, but also realistic. But I think with this, you're going to feel good. You're going to feel good about things at the conclusion of this podcast relative to FAU football and what might be coming starting August 30th at Michigan State. I asked on Twitter, at KLV Says, by the way, at KLV Says on Twitter, I asked the following question right after the July 4th holiday, and it read like this. You will consider the 2024 FAU football season a success if blank happens. You'll consider the 2024 FAU football season a success if blank happens, okay? Just a little social experiment, a little fun while we were able to kick our feet up and eat some grilled tubed meats during the Independence Day holiday. Birdman, he replies 6 wins and a bowl appearance. Ryan, bowl game minimum, compete for a conference title is full success. Aiden, easy schedule this year, should be an 8-win team at least. Aaron says bowl game. Colby, if they aren't worse than they were last year. Well, that would mean 5 wins. I don't know how happy that would make people just to win 5, but noted. Sun City Cards, someone streaks on the field. I don't think that is an indication of any success whatsoever, but I suppose could be arranged. Joe, we win more games than we lose. That would mean 7-5, 7-6, 8-4. I'll take it. That's good. Not so depressed FAU fan. We beat USF and FIU and right to a bowl game. I would certainly co-sign for that. Cooper, conference championship appearance and a bowl win. Then there is sidelines FAU. Bowl. Maddox, bowl appearance, first 4 games of the season should be 3-1, 4-0 from there. Own USF and Temple, finish off Navy. You have yourself a bowl team. Problem is FAU doesn't play Navy. They play Army, but I understand what you're saying. Tony, bowl game. David, bowl game minimum. Craig, make a bowl game and win. Ryan, bowl game. Owlsley's Pellets, bare minimum, beat those 2. I suppose he's talking FIU and USF. And go bowling. Jack, bowl game, and not name the Boca Raton Bowl. Jack, I would take any bowl game at this point, okay? Nathan, 9-10 wins. Anything less is meh. 6 wins in a bowl game is a participation trophy. Well, we'll circle back to that one. Albrecht, positive season, 7-6 or higher. Dalton, bowl game. I think the offense is going to struggle. Fair enough. Dad to ZTK, bowl eligible. Douglas Spencer, Tyreek Starks starts at quarterback. Again, I've said it before. I have no idea who is going to play quarterback for Florida Atlantic in 2024. Okay. So that's just a little indication of the type of feedback that I got. But you hear a lot of bowl games, 6 wins, bowl games, 6 wins, bowl games, 6 wins. So just using that as a base, okay? FAU, no matter how high a ceiling you want this program to have in 2024, what you want them to accomplish, let's just simply operate off of FAU 6 wins, qualifies, bowl game, plays in the postseason. Okay? Fair enough? Perfect. All right. So FAU in this ESPN FPI model sits at number 85. 85 in the country, all of FBS. Okay. That's after finishing last year at 95 in the FPI. So those are important because with FAU finishing 95, understand this. There were still 7 teams ranked below Florida Atlantic who finished last year at 95. 7 teams finished below 95 in the ESPN FPI at the end of the season that were bowl eligible. So Florida Atlantic sitting at 85 from a predictive standpoint, bowl eligibility almost feels like a certainty. And here's what tanked Florida Atlantic a year ago and why FAU, despite 95 and have 7 teams below them bowl eligible, but not Florida Atlantic at 4 wins. Want to know what tanked FAU? These 2 games. UAB, who finished at 109 in the ESPN FPI. Florida Atlantic a full 14 spots ahead of them. FAU loses 45-42 in Birmingham in the final 3 seconds, okay? And then the East Carolina lost listless, and maybe the poster game for FAU struggles in the final month. They were 99 to finish the 2023 campaign, 4 slots lower than FAU, okay? So Florida Atlantic, the reason, based on the ESPN FPI, the reason Florida Atlantic didn't go to a bowl game last year, these 2 losses at UAB, home against East Carolina, both in the final month, that dreaded November for FAU football, okay? So understand that. Now, understand this. And a reminder, FAU at 85, okay, in the ESPN FPI in the country, and number 4 in the American Athletic Conference. All right. Last year, FAU entered the year with the following teams ahead of them in the ESPN FPI. At the start of the season, these teams were ahead of Florida Atlantic in the ESPN FPI. Again, the predictive metric that ESPN uses that factors in offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency once the season gets started, but in the preseason, returning starters, production from a year ago, returning coaching staff, and a whole mess of other complex inputs, okay? Last year, FAU entered the season with 5 teams ahead of them in the ESPN FPI. They were Clemson, Illinois, UTSA, Tulane, and Ohio, okay? So to put this in simple terms, you're going into the year, according to the predictive model, you have 5 teams that sit ahead of you already in the ESPN FPI. That means you're expected to lose those games, okay? Clemson, Illinois, UTSA, Tulane, Ohio, all right? Those 5 games you're expected to lose. That leaves 7 games left on the schedule for you to find 6 wins, okay? 7 games where the models would give you varying chances of finding 6 wins. It leaves a very small margin for error, okay? Clemson, Illinois, UTSA, Tulane, Ohio were the teams that sat ahead of FAU preseason ESPN FPI 2023. So you toss those out, you have 7 games to win 6. You got to be pretty darn good, and you got to be pretty clean to pull that off. Unfortunately, FAU just wasn't good enough. And again, as we established earlier, what tanked FAU were losses to UAB and East Carolina, especially UAB that sat 14 slots lower than FAU when all was said and done. Those screwed up FAU's chances of going to the postseason. This year, after last year, 5 teams ahead of FAU to start the season, ESPN FPI, leaving you 7 games to win 6. This year, there's only 2 teams on FAU's schedule, and an FCS side that doesn't get factored into this, but 2 FBS teams on Florida Atlantic's schedule that enter the year ahead of the Owls in FPI. Those 2 teams, UTSA at 56 and Michigan State at 68. So below FAU to start the year in the ESPN FPI, USF at 88. That's right, mighty USF, somehow below FAU in the ESPN FPI. East Carolina 94, Tulsa 101, Army 121, FIU 132, Temple 133, UConn 110, Charlotte 116, North Texas 106. So that leaves you, as opposed to last year, where there were 7 games to find 6 wins, if you're going by expected wins with this predictive computer model, in 2024, FAU has 10 games to find 6 wins. How much of a difference is that? That leaves FAU actually a little bit of a cushion based on this year's schedule. So Florida Atlantic, when it comes to strength of schedule, because I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of that from opposing fan bases if FAU does play well and starts to stack up wins here in 2024. Strength of schedule. Strength of schedule is really poor for Florida Atlantic. FAU strength, and it's low. FAU comes in at 126 in strength of schedule, according to the ESPN FPI metric. And you know what? Who gives a crap? Who cares? Let's just look at USF, for example. They had one of the worst strength of schedules in the entire country last year, and they rode it to a 7-6. It sometimes scuffled to a 7-6. But you know what? They've been able to carry themselves like they accomplished something because they eked out 6 wins with that paltry schedule and then blew out the equivalent of a high school team in Syracuse in the Boca Raton Bowl, and they've had a lot of momentum. Big offseason. You know what? I'd take that at FAU. Doesn't matter how you get to 6 or who you play to get to 6. If you get to 6 and give yourself a chance in a bowl game, that is much-needed momentum for this football program. So don't get sucked into the, FAU schedule, they have UConn, they have who cares? You know what? I say good. Let's pick up wins and let's play an extra game or 2 here in 2024. Sound good? Sounds good to me. All right. Now, let's go ahead and take a deep breath because we have some more things to dig through here as we go through the ESPN FPI computer model and why it has a positive, a rosy outlook for Florida Atlantic in 2024. FAU sits at 85 in the FPI with a strength of schedule of 126, okay? Last year, FAU finished the year with an offensive efficiency of 111. I mean, one of the worst in the country. Absolutely not good enough. The defensive efficiency, pretty solid at 85. But Florida Atlantic with a 111 offensive efficiency, if you can just push that number up a little bit, I don't even think you have to get out of the 100s in ESPN FPI offensive efficiency, and you're sitting easily in a postseason spot. So here's the most important predictive, the wins and losses, okay? And this is where decimal points come in, and this is where the 10th spot gets filled with all these numbers. But ESPN's FPI has Florida Atlantic at 7.4 wins and 4.8 losses. 7.4 wins and 4.8 losses on the year. That is well inside bowl territory, okay? That is extremely positive if you're FAU. But the strength of schedule, and here's your response to that. Who cares? I'd much rather, with Tom Herman, this staff, this program trying to get its footing in year 2 of this new era, I'd much rather them have a blueprint than having to scuffle through a really difficult non-conference like they did a year ago. Is this a lesser non-conference than FAU has played in the past? Yeah, it's been a long time since FAU played a non-conference that on paper looked as mundane as this one does. And you know what? That's fine. Who cares? And still got to go out there, still got to win the games. But the schedule is set up for success for Florida Atlantic. And credit the schedule makers, those at FAU who set up the schedules, for giving it Florida Atlantic this opportunity to try and gain some momentum for this program. So Florida Atlantic at 85, number 4 in the AAC when it comes to ESPN FPI, and number 13 overall in Group of 5 in college football. That'll That'll work. Now, another thing I want to look at is last year. So we talk about how FAU, if you want to go by what the preseason looked like in the ESPN FPI in 2023, FAU basically had 7 games to win 6. But think about how many one-score games Florida Atlantic had. Lost 4 one-score games last year. At home to Ohio, that's where Jaquan Burton got destroyed on the first play from scrimmage. Nothing really was the same after that. Lost to Illinois. That was Daniel Richardson's first start. Lost to UAB, that wild comeback into the losing at the last second on a field goal, and then the loss to Rice in a game that didn't mean anything at the end of the year because FAU was not going to gain bowl eligibility regardless. But 4 games, 1-score losses, FAU gets 2 of those. We're having a completely different conversation right now. The point I'm trying to make is that FAU a lot closer than maybe it feels like. And was last season discouraging? Sure. But you had a starting quarterback go down 3 games into the year, okay? You had to make do on offense. You beat a rival 56-14 on their home field, and you were in position to compete for a conference title until November came, okay? This is what November looked like last year for FAU. At UAB, home against East Carolina, home against Tulane, at Rice, okay? In the game that meant nothing. Like I said, you had a chance to beat UAB, couldn't do it. Road game, all right. Inexcusable home loss to East Carolina, especially the way it played out. Sure, okay. Home against Tulane, that's a team that played in the AAC Conference Championship game as a New Year's Day Bowl winner, the entire thing. That was going to be a difficult task. And then at Rice, again, in a game that didn't mean anything. November this year, and keep in mind, FAU 1-10 in their last 11 November games. 1-10 going back to 2021 in games in November, 5 games in November this year. Homecoming against USF that Friday night in Boca. At East Carolina, that's a Thursday night game. At Temple, very low on the ESPN FPI rankings. Home against Charlotte, and then at Tulsa, also below FAU. So objectively, this November is on paper a bit easier to navigate than last November. But again, you got to get the job done. And as we've seen, FAU has lost some games that you thought they absolutely should have won on a multitude of occasions in November. So just keep that in mind. But there's another positive there, is that this November likely a bit easier to traverse. And let's talk about the big 3 in the AAC. Those are Tulane, Memphis, UTSA. You only have one of those teams on your schedule this year as opposed to 2 a year ago. You only have one, and that is UTSA. You go to the Alamo Dome. Other than that, you're outside of that universe. You had Tulane on the schedule and UTSA last year. You only have UTSA this time around. So all of these things together, okay? FAU, number 13, group of 5, ESPN FPI going into 2024, all right? 4th best mark in the AAC. That's great. You can identify the 2 games, according to the ESPN FPI, that sent Florida Atlantic to the bottom of the sea last year, and that is the loss at UAB and the home loss to East Carolina. You identified that. The ESPN FPI has Florida Atlantic at 7.4 wins to 4.8 losses. That is bowl game for Florida Atlantic, and maybe even into the discussion for an AAC title into the final couple of weeks of the season. FAU at this 85 in the ESPN FPI last year, 7 teams below FAU who finished 95 were bowl eligible and played in the postseason. All right, so you get anywhere close to the preseason outlook from the ESPN FPI for Florida Atlantic, the Owls are in really, really good shape. A reminder, FAU last year had 5 teams ahead of them in the 2023 preseason ESPN FPI. So, again, that leaves you, if you believe that this is going to be correct across the board every single game, FAU was going to pick up 5 losses right off the bat before the season even started, leaving you 7 games to win 6 and gain bowl eligibility. If you go off that same wavelength this year, there's only 2 teams ahead of FAU in the FPI. UTSA, Michigan State. Everybody else sits below Florida Atlantic. If you truly believe in the FPI, then Florida Atlantic has 10 games to find 6 as opposed to 7 to find 6 a year ago. That is an absolute positive. And then one-score games. You had 4 one-score games that FAU played in and lost last year. Ohio, Illinois, UAB, Rice. You turn 2 of those around, you're in great, great, great shape. And November looks a little bit easier to traverse. Not much easier, but a little bit easier to traverse. And you only have 1 of the AAC Big 3 as opposed to the 2 that were on the schedule a year ago. All right. So bam, 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 bam. Positive, 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 positive across the board for you. All right. Good. That's great stuff. Then there's this. The ESPN FPI is part of a huge conglomerate, just a number of college football predictive models. Okay, it's not the only one. I use it because it's notable, because it's ESPN, and because there's been a lot made of it over the last week or so. Okay, ESPN FPI, they are all of these models of the prediction tracker. This is a website that takes all of the computer models, all of the predictive models, and puts them into one aggregated place and ranks them and gives you what the results were in past years in terms of how they predicted the season. Okay. And individual games for that matter. So the NCAA Prediction Award last year, according to the prediction tracker, the single best, most accurate predictor all of last year was called Donchis D Ratings. Donchis D Ratings. DRatings.com. DonchisDratings.com. All right. So the Donchis D rating system, the best predictor in college football in 2023, that same predictor has put out its predictions for week 0 and week 1 of the 2024 college football season. All right. There are going to be 39 games played between FBS teams in week 0 and week 1 of the college football season. Florida Atlantic, Michigan State, FAU on August 30th, according to DRatings.com, the best predictive model of 2023. FAU has a 48% chance to win that game in East Lansing against Michigan State. The predictive score of that game, Michigan State 23, Florida Atlantic 22.3. FAU and Michigan State is the closest game model prediction of all 39 games played in week 0 and week 1 combined. How about that? So I suppose you could say, based on the best predictive model of 2023, that Michigan State is already on upset alert when Florida Atlantic comes marching in August 30th on that Friday night. The closest game, according to the best predictor in all of college football last year, the closest game to watch is going to be in East Lansing with FAU and Michigan State. That's pretty fun stuff, right? So I think there's a lot to be positive about. And my opinion is you take your 6 wins. If 6 wins is the ceiling in 2024, fine. It gets you into a bowl game. You take it, you embrace it, you move on. I'm not going to complain about not getting 8 wins or 9 wins. If it happens, absolutely outstanding. I'll celebrate it. We'll have a great time. And that means you're also in the discussion for an AAC title late into the year, which is an awful lot of fun. But if it's just 6 wins for the good of the program to just simply get into a bowl game, even if it's the Boca Raton Bowl, I say right on. Great stuff. I'm not going to be picky when it comes to an FAU football program that has gone to a bowl game only 5 times in the history of the program dating back to 2001, okay? So you can think what you want. and I'm not here to change minds, but I would advise you to probably take at least in the neighborhood of the approach I'm taking to this Florida Atlantic football season in 2024. So ESPN FPI, computer predictive models, they paint a pretty positive picture for FAU this season. I'm looking forward to it. This is the Florida Atlantic Voice. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever. Just subscribe wherever you get your podcast. It'll come right to your phone every time a new episode drops. We are going to, for as long as he remains in the Bachelorette, John Mitchell, former FAU wide receiver and tight end. We love the man. Truly one of the all-around good guys to ever play at Florida Atlantic. He is contested on the Bachelorette this summer. So we'll be keeping track of him with emergency episodes for however long he goes through the competition. If he's anything like Tyler Cameron, he's going to be there in the final episode. So we have a proud tradition at Florida Atlantic of FAU football players, former FAU football players, going deep, deep, deep into the conversation and collecting those roses. Before we say goodbye, this edition of the Florida Atlantic Voice, we've been talking about Michigan State a little bit. FAU's Week 1 opponent, August 30th. Get to know your opponent is what we're going to call this segment that I just made up off the top of my head. Some success at Michigan State off the football field. They're going through very much a transition in that football program, changing coaching staffs, controversy that led to a dismissal a year ago. That's one thing, but this is another thing, and this is what FAU is going to be going up against in East Lansing. Michigan State in 2023, 2024, the national champions in cardboard recycling. Michigan State national champions in cardboard recycling. That is not a joke. That is an actual national championship that Michigan State won, that the Spartans took home the hardware for. I don't know if that hardware was made out of cardboard, but they've won that national championship. And a second national championship for Michigan State. They're the national champions in the tractor backhoe loader national championships. The tractor backhoe loader national champions, Michigan State. How you win a championship in tractor backhoe loading, there is a written exam, and then there's an execution exam, and it goes 50-50. And Nate Hawks, score out of 100, scored a 94. He delivers Michigan State a tractor backhoe loader national championship. So something to impress your friends with, and something to keep in mind as perhaps a key. Try and overcome that aura when Florida Atlantic goes to East Lansing to play Michigan State on August 30th. Again, Florida Atlantic Voice, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll talk to you next time as we get closer and closer and closer to this FAU college football season. Training camp is right around the corner. I'm Ken LaVicka. This has been the Florida Atlantic Voice. Talk to you next time.